Could you make me a woman?
Behind the Mrs. Doubtfire makeup was Robin Williams, the man Sam Neill once called the saddest person he had ever met. And the more I look back at this cast after 33 years, the more I realize that movie was never just a comedy. Robin later passed away after his final months were devastated by Lewy body dementia. Sally Field, the toughest woman in the film, survived a childhood of abuse by her stepfather, and Pierce Brosnan broke down in helplessness as both his wife and daughter were taken by the same illness. And today, we're going to look back at the Mrs. Doubtfire cast then and now to see how time has changed them. But that's not all. Throughout this video, there are also some facts. Very few people know what Robin did for Sally during a time of loss, what the three Hillard kids said when they reunited after more than 30 years. Are you ready? Number 1. Robin Williams as Daniel Hillard, or Mrs. Doubtfire. Let's start with the most important name in Mrs. Doubtfire, and also the saddest man in America. Robin McLaurin Williams was born on July 21, 1951. When Mrs. Doubtfire hit theaters in 1993, he was 42, and by then, Robin was not some rising star anymore. He was Robin Williams. American audiences already knew him from Mork and Mindy, then loved him through Good Morning Vietnam Dead Poets Society and the voice of Genie in Aladdin. In Mrs. Doubtfire, he was the lead and also one of the producers. But what really made Robin different from a lot of stars of that era was that behind that almost endless energy was a really heavy inner life. He did not grow up lacking money. He grew up lonely, went through an isolated childhood, changed schools a lot, and got bullied. Then once fame hit, Robin struggled with cocaine and alcohol. The death of John Belushi, along with the fact that he was about to become a father, was the jolt that made him stop. After more than 20 years, sober, he still relapsed, went into treatment in 2006, then checked into treatment again in 2014 to keep himself standing. Maybe that is exactly why he played Daniel Hillard so well. Under all that makeup and all those loud jokes, he was not imagining that pain. He was reaching into something he knew way too well. Robin's final years were where things became truly heartbreaking. He went through heart surgery in 2009. Then his neurological health declined so fast that people around him could only stand there and watch him slowly slip away from himself. Robin passed away on August 11, 2014 at 63 years old. Only after that did his family and doctors clearly determine that he had Lewy body dementia, the disease that had been destroying his brain from the inside. And that sadness did not end when Robin died. It stayed with his family. His son, Zach Williams, later spoke publicly about his own struggles with addiction and depression, while Zelda Williams had to leave social media because she was being harassed right in the middle of the family's mourning. Robin is gone today, but Mrs. Doubtfire is still one of the roles that makes audiences remember him with the warmest kind of love. Now I get why Sam Neill once said Robin Williams was the saddest person he had ever met. Leave a comment below to remember and honor this wonderful man before we move on to the most important female role. Number 2. Sally Field as Miranda Hillard. Sally Margaret Field was born on November 6, 1946.
Happy birthday.
When Mrs. Doubtfire came out in 1993, she was 47, and this year, she is 80. In the film, Sally played Miranda Hillard, the female lead, opposite Robin Williams's Daniel Hillard. The important thing is that at that point, Sally was not just some name brought in to fill out the cast. She was already a major star. She had gone from Gidget and the Flying Nun to heavyweight roles like Sybil Norma Ray and Places in the Heart, and she already had 2 Best Actress Oscars before stepping into this movie. But Sally Field's life was nowhere near as smooth as her calm exterior might suggest. In her memoir, In Pieces, and in later interviews, Sally said she was sexually abused by her stepfather, Jock Mahoney, starting in childhood. She also spoke honestly about years of severe depression and binge eating disorder. Then, in 2024, Sally opened up about another painful memory. At 17, she had to go to Tijuana for an illegal abortion with almost no real anesthesia, and a technician also behaved inappropriately during the procedure. That is more than enough to understand that Sally's toughness was not some gift she was handed. It was something she had to build herself just to survive. Her love life was not much gentler either. Her relationship with Burt Reynolds, by Sally's own account, was controlling and deeply damaging. Then, in 2005, she was diagnosed with osteoporosis and later became public about raising awareness of that disease. Even now, she is still the image of an icon growing older, beautifully receiving the SAG Life Achievement Award in 2023 and still taking the lead in Netflix's Remarkably Bright Creatures, which premieres on May 8, 2026. I truly admire her, and I'm honestly happy knowing she is still standing after so many upheavals in life. And before we leave behind the two central faces of Mrs. Doubtfire, I want to pause for a second. Because if we only look at Robin Williams and Sally Field through the two biggest roles in this movie, it still is not enough. Around them are some really memorable behind-the-scenes truths, and those little pieces are what make this movie warmer, more human, and more unforgettable in a way all its own. While the movie was filming, Sally Field got word that her father had died. Robin was the one who noticed something was wrong, then helped rearrange the shooting schedule so she could leave the set and go take care of her family. I think that is the kind of decency you do not see on a poster, but it stays with people long after the movie is over. On set, Robin was basically a whirlwind. Chris Columbus said he improvised so much that the crew had to run 4 cameras at once just to keep up, and the total amount of footage shot reached nearly 2 million feet. One of the hardest scenes was the one where Daniel had to keep switching back and forth between himself and Mrs. Doubtfire in front of the social worker, and that scene alone got filmed around 18 times. What really says something is that after all that beautiful chaos, Mrs. Doubtfire still won the Golden Globe for Best Motion Picture Comedy or Musical, and Robin Williams also took home Best Actor. But if Robin and Sally were the grown-ups holding the movie together, then the part that really jolts audiences after 33 years lives with the 3 Hillard kids. Number 3. Lisa Jakub as Lydia Hillard. Lisa Jakub was born on December 27, 1978 in Toronto, Canada. When Mrs. Doubtfire came out in 1993, she was 15, and this year she is 48. In the movie, she played Lydia Hillard, the oldest daughter in the Hillard family, a supporting role that really mattered. To mainstream audiences back then, Lisa was not a major star like Robin Williams or Sally Field, but Mrs. Doubtfire made her one of those faces people instantly remembered from family movies in the 1990s. What is worth pointing out is that Lisa's life after that movie did not go the way people usually imagine for a child actor. While filming, she got expelled from her high school in Canada because her remote learning arrangement was no longer accepted. Robin Williams even wrote a letter to the principal defending her, but it did not change the decision. It sounds small maybe, but for a 15-year-old girl, that was a brutal hit. And that was only the surface. Lisa later spoke very openly about anxiety, depression, and panic attacks, and even described what it felt like to be drowned by pressure rejection and the shallowness of Hollywood. In the end, she made the choice to walk away from acting while she was still very young because she did not want to keep living somebody else's dream. Today, Lisa Jakub is not an actress anymore. She is an author, a speaker, someone who works in mental health, has a podcast, writes about anxiety, and lives a much calmer life than anything Hollywood ever promised. I have always found Lisa's story beautiful in that way. It is a real blessing that she got out before Hollywood swallowed her whole and crushed her the way it has so many other child actors. Number 4. Matthew Lawrence as Chris Hillard. Matthew William Lawrence was born on February 11, 1980. When Mrs. Doubtfire came out in 1993, he was 13, and this year he is 46. In the movie, Matthew played Chris Hillard, the only son in the Hillard family. For audiences back then, Matthew was not yet a name that dominated the screen, because later on, he also showed up in Boy Meets World and stayed tied to the television memories of a whole generation. What makes Matthew's story heavier than people might think is what happened during his adult years. In 2023, he publicly said that a director had once invited him to a hotel room, asked him to take his clothes off, and suggested that if he went along with it, he could get a Marvel role. Matthew said he refused, and then his own agency dropped him. I think that detail matters, not just because it is dark, but because it reminds us that the ugly side of Hollywood does not only target women. It is just that men rarely say it out loud. Matthew's private life has not been much smoother than his career either. He married Cheryl Burke in 2019, then that marriage fell apart in 2022 after less than 3 years. Right now, Matthew is still in entertainment, just moving at a different pace, a lot quieter than during his child star days. He co-hosts Brotherly Love podcast with his Lawrence brothers, and he also co-hosts Second Chance, Love for Hallmark, plus with Chili from TLC. The little boy Chris from back then did not disappear from Hollywood, but he also did not let Hollywood swallow him whole. And come with me as we move on to the 5th name. This is the one that will probably surprise you the most when you look back after 33 years, the youngest little girl in this family. Number 5. Mara Wilson as Natalie Hillard. Mara. Elizabeth Wilson was born in 1987. When Mrs. Doubtfire came out in 1993, she was just 6, and this year she is 39. In the film, Mara played Natalie Hillard, the youngest daughter in the Hillard family, a supporting part but an incredibly standout one. What is really memorable is that Mrs. Doubtfire was also Mara's first movie role. Just a few years later, that little girl became one of the most familiar child stars in America, thanks to Miracle on 34th Street and then Matilda. For audiences in the 1990s, Mara was not just the youngest Hillard kid. She was part of our whole childhood. But Mara's life was not gentle the way people's memories of her might make it seem. In 1996, her mother died of breast cancer when Mara was still very young, and that loss shaped pretty much everything that came after. Later on, Mara openly said she had been diagnosed with OCD depression and panic disorder at 12. She also admitted that growing up famous was not easy at all, especially as she got older, became less of what Hollywood saw as cute, and slowly realized she did not belong in that machine anymore. What I like about Mara is that she did not try to hold on to the child star image. She stepped away from movies and moved into writing voice work and storytelling in her own way. Right now, Mara describes herself as a writer-actor and audiobook narrator, a life that is smaller than Hollywood maybe, but a whole lot more real. And if Mara is the face that makes audiences do a double take the most when they look back, then what these 3 kids remember about Robin Williams offset is the real reward for anybody who has made it this far. After going through the 3 very different paths taken by Lisa, Jakub, Matthew Lawrence, and Mara Wilson, I think the most interesting part is not really how they grew up. It is what the 3 Hillard kids still managed to hold on to after more than 30 years. In 2024, all 3 of them reunited, and Lisa said it still felt like family. Then there is the experience of working with Robin Williams. All 3 of them remember him like some kind of unpredictable whirlwind. Lisa said that stepping into a scene with Robin meant accepting that nobody knew where the next line was going to go. Mara said she was still too little back then, so a lot of Robin's jokes just flew right over her head before she could even crack up. Hearing that, you realize those 3 kids did not just act alongside a huge star. They grew up surrounded by an energy that no script could ever really hold. Matthew also revealed one really sweet detail: the animals at the birthday party near the beginning of the movie were actually the idea of little Matthew himself back then. And there is something even warmer than that. Matthew said Robin once seriously told him never to get involved with drugs, especially cocaine, and he carried that advice with him for years. If the three Hillard kids gave the movie its heart, then the adults standing around Daniel Hillard were the layer of color that made that world messy, funny, sad, and sharper than we remember. Number 6. Pierce Brosnan as Stu Dunmeyer. Pierce Brendan Brosnan was born in 1953. When Mrs. Doubtfire came out in 1993, he was 40, and by the way, we count it now, he is 73 this year. In the movie, Brosnan played Stu Dunmeyer, the man who stepped into Miranda's life after her marriage fell apart. At that point, Pierce was already a familiar face thanks to Remington Steele, but he had not entered his worldwide breakout phase yet. Just 2 years later, he became James Bond with GoldenEye, and looking back at Mrs. Doubtfire, now it almost feels like we are watching Pierce Brosnan right before the moment he turned into an international icon. But behind that polished look was a life that was not light at all. His father left very early, his mother had to move to London for work, and Brosnan was raised mostly by relatives. The biggest tragedy of his life was in his family. His first wife, Cassandra Harris, died of ovarian cancer in 1991. Then, in 2013, his daughter Charlotte also died from that exact same disease. He is not just the man in this cast who aged the most beautifully. He is a man who has lived through real loss. Right now, Brosnan is still working steadily, including the Thursday Murder Club for Netflix, and he is still holding on to a strong marriage with Keely Shea Smith. His life has not been completely free of little bumps either, like getting fined in Yellowstone in 2024 for stepping off the trail. Number 7. Harvey Fierstein as Frank Hillard. Harvey Forbes. Fierstein was born on June 6, 1954, in Brooklyn, New York. When Mrs. Doubtfire came out in 1993, he was 39, and this year, he is 72. In the movie, Harvey played Frank Hillard, Daniel's brother. By the time the movie came out, he was already a huge name in American theater, thanks to Torch Song Trilogy and La Cage aux Folles, and he had also been an outspoken voice for gay rights from very early on. What makes Harvey memorable is not some tabloid-style scandal. It is the fact that he has lived his whole life as someone who refused to shrink himself down to fit anybody else's mold. In 2022, when he released his memoir, I Was Better, Last Night, Harvey said very plainly that he still had questions about his own identity, that he was not sure whether he was a man or a woman in the way other people wanted to label him, but that had never stopped him from living, writing, and working as himself. Around that same time, he also talked about sobriety, about pulling himself out of years of addiction, and that is the part that really gives Harvey's image its depth. Right now, Harvey is a living theater legend, receiving the Special Tony Award for Lifetime Achievement in the Theater in 2025, and he still shows up in public with the same sharp, loud, honest personality that made his name in the first place. And when somebody like Harvey steps into the world of Mrs. Doubtfire, the behind-the-scenes stories around that grown-up cast really start getting interesting. And before we leave the two most important men in the grown-up side of Mrs. Doubtfire, I want to pause for a beat. Because if Pierce Brosnan brought that almost flawless elegance to Stu Dunmeyer and Harvey Fierstein opened the door to the weirdest transformation in the whole movie, then the most fun part of both of them actually lives in the stuff that happened around Robin Williams while the cameras were rolling. Pierce Brosnan once said the now legendary line run by Fruiting was never in the script. Robin Williams threw one line and it slipped, then the next one hit, and he instantly improvised it into a moment audiences are still talking about now. Brosnan also said that the first time he met Robin on set, It was not meeting Robin Williams in the normal way. At all, it was meeting a half. Robin half. Mrs. Doubtfire version of him, with the head already fully made up, but the rest of him still in a Hawaii shirt shorts and all that arm and leg hair. And Harvey Fierstein revealed that the line, "Oh honey, I'm so happy," in the scene where Daniel goes to Frank, was also one of his own last-second improvisations. If Pierce and Harvey made the grown-up world of the movie more charming and more chaotic, then the deeper memory of Mrs. Doubtfire lives in those supporting faces the audience may forget by name, but the second they see them, they remember the whole movie. Let's see where they are in 2026. Number 8. Robert Prosky as Jonathan Lundy. Robert Prosky was born on December 13, 1930 in Philadelphia. When Mrs. Doubtfire came out in 1993, he was 63. In the movie, Prosky played Jonathan Lundy, the television station boss. For American audiences back then, Prosky was not the kind of flashy star splashed across magazine covers. He was the kind of supporting face you saw and instantly believed the kind of thing old Hollywood used to have a lot of, and now feels much rarer. What makes Robert Prosky so admirable is that he did not come up through shortcuts. Before becoming a familiar face in film and television, he had already spent more than 2 decades working at Arena Stage in Washington, had studied economics, worked in the family grocery store, then worked as an accountant before returning to the stage. Only after that did he slowly become a serious heavyweight character actor with Thief, The Natural Broadcast News, and Hill Street Blues. Prosky's private life was also a lot calmer than many others on this list. He married Ida Hove in 1960, had 3 sons, and lived a quiet, steady life that was almost completely untouched by noisy scandal. Robert Prosky died on December 8, 2008, just 5 days before his 78th birthday, from complications after heart surgery. Number 9. Anne Haney as Mrs. Sellner. Anne Ryan Haney was born on March 4, 1934, in Memphis, Tennessee. When Mrs. Doubtfire came out in 1993, she was 59. In the movie, Anne Haney played Mrs. Sellner, the family court worker. She was not an A-list star, but she was one of those supporting faces American audiences saw and instantly trusted. Later on, people also remembered her from The American President and Liar Liar. What I like about Anne Haney is that she did not come to Hollywood by the usual route. The Los Angeles Times once called her a character actress who came into her own later in life, and that really was the perfect way to put it. She only truly took off in film and television after she was past 40, after her husband died, and her daughter went off to college. By then, she had already lived through nearly half a lifetime. Her private life was also much more low-key than a lot of others on this list, almost completely untouched by loud scandals. Anne Haney died on May 26, 2001, at 67 from congestive heart failure. A pretty short life, much like her career. And now it is time for us to get to the final supporting face on this list. Number 10. Polly Holliday as Gloria Chaney. Polly Dean. Holliday was born on July 2, 1937 in Jasper, Alabama. When Mrs. Doubtfire came out in 1993, she was 56. In the movie, Polly Holliday played Gloria Chaney. And the interesting thing is that in real life, Polly was much older than this role. She was not some forgettable supporting actress. She was a real television icon in America, best known for playing Flo on the sitcom Alice, the character who turned "Kiss My Grits" into a catchphrase in pop culture. That career also brought her major awards, including 2 Golden Globes. Polly's life did not follow the usual glamorous path either. Her parents divorced when she was little. She was raised mostly by her mother, then studied music, earned a graduate degree, and even taught music in public school before moving fully into theater and television. She never married, never had children, and said very plainly that her work was her life. I think that is probably why Polly always had something about her that felt so solid, so distinct, so hard to confuse with anybody else. She died on September 9th, 2025, at 88, closing out the long journey of an artist who had given almost her whole life to the work. Oh, you thought this was the end. Not yet. I want to let you in on a few more really interesting things about the supporting faces in Mrs. Doubtfire, because a lot of the time the people who only show up for a few minutes are exactly the ones who make a movie live forever in your memory. Take the scene where Mrs. Sellner comes to the apartment to inspect the place. Chris Columbus said that was one of the stretches where Robin Williams had to work the hardest, both physically and with the dialogue, and the whole back-and-forth sequence between Daniel and Mrs. Doubtfire by itself got shot around 18 times. And there is something else a lot of viewers do not know. Mrs. Doubtfire almost ended up being a much sadder movie. Deleted scenes that came out later showed Lydia getting distracted during the spelling bee because her parents were fighting, and there was even a whole scene where Daniel and Miranda had a really ugly shouting match while the kids heard everything upstairs. If those scenes had stayed in this movie, probably would have leaned much more into the pain of divorce instead of keeping the familiar warmth audiences still remember. And that is when people realize Robert Prosky, Anne Haney, and Polly Holliday were not just supporting roles thrown in to be there. Prosky was a deeply seasoned character actor. Anne Haney came into Hollywood pretty late, but still managed to leave behind around 50 film and television roles, and Polly Holliday had once been a full-blown television icon with Flo from Alice. People may come to Mrs. Doubtfire because of Robin Williams, but they stay with it for a long time because of the whole world of actors around him. This is the comedy that makes people the easiest to cry at because it touches the exact place a lot of families never really know how to name. A marriage coming apart. A clumsy father who still loves his kids with total desperation. A mother forced to be stronger than she ever wanted to be. What makes me think even more is that the people who passed through this movie in real life were carrying their own wounds too. Maybe that is why when we look back at them now, the movie feels a little sadder, but also a little warmer. It is not just a screen memory anymore. It turns into a memory of time itself. And if Mrs. Doubtfire was once part of your own younger years too, then you probably already know that feeling. There are some movies we do not go back to just to remember one scene or one joke. We go back to meet the version of ourselves we used to be. And if you like these kinds of returns, stay here with me. We still have plenty of old faces, old movies, and beautiful memories left to talk about.